What is Shibboleth, and why is it important in Judges 12? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Judges on walking through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing Judges 12 verses 1 to 7. Before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to Judges 12 verse 1, but if you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Judges chapter 12, beginning at verse 1. Then the men of Ephraim gathered together, crossed over towards Zaphon, and said to Jephthah, "Why did you cross over to fight against the people of Ammon, and did not call us to go with you? We will burn your house down on you with fire." And Jephthah said to them, "My people and I were in a great struggle with the people of Ammon, and when I called you, you did not deliver me out of their hands. So when I saw that you would not deliver me, I took my life in my hands and crossed over against the people of Ammon, and the Lord delivered them into my hand. Why then have you come up to me this day to fight against me?" Now Jephthah gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought against Ephraim. And the men of Gilead defeated Ephraim, because they said, "You Gileadites are fugitives of Ephraim among the Ephraimites and among the Manassites." The Gileadites seized the fords of the Jordan before the Ephraimites arrived. And when any Ephraimite who escaped said, "Let me cross over," the men of Gilead would say to him, Are you an Ephraimite?" If he said no, then they would say to him, "Then say Shibboleth." And he would say Sibboleth, for he could not pronounce it right. Then they would take him and kill him at the fords of the Jordan. There fell at that time 42,000 Ephraimites. And Jephthah judged Israel 6 years. Then Jephthah the Gileadite died and was buried among the cities of Gilead. In our last lesson, we had Jephthah defeating the Ammonites in battle. As a consequence of a foolish vow, Jephthah's daughter was placed in service to the Lord for the entire rest of her life. Thus she remained a virgin, and Jephthah's family line would go extinct upon her death, for Jephthah had no sons. We discussed in detail why we shouldn't interpret Jephthah's vow as him having offered his daughter on an altar to God. And so if you didn't see that lesson and want to learn more about that, we invite you to watch the last lesson in this series, which can be found on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/East End Church of Christ under the Walking Through the Bible Judges playlist. Coming now to chapter 12, we have the aftermath of this battle. The men of Ephraim gathered together and crossed over the Jordan River into Gilead and came towards Zaphon. We don't exactly know where this is, but a possible location is now on the screen. Their complaint to Jephthah is that he didn't call them to go into battle with him when he went and fought against the Ammonites. Now, why would they have a problem with that? Let's remember the politics of Israel at this time. Where was the tabernacle located? It was in Shiloh, which is in a city of Ephraim. Where was the tribe that Joshua came from, the man who led Israel into the promised land? Well, that was the tribe of Ephraim. The tribe of Ephraim always thought of itself as a ruling tribe in Israel, even when God said that the kings would come from the lineage of David and the tribe of Judah later on. If you recall back to chapter 8, even in the days of Gideon, which by now would have been over 80 years earlier, Ephraim at that time was angry with Gideon for not being called into battle. It was only because of the level-headedness of Gideon that further conflict was avoided. However, Jephthah was not Gideon. Ephraim had threatened to burn down Jephthah's house with fire, which would have included killing him, and had insulted the Gileadites by saying that they were actually fugitives from Ephraim, from among the Ephraimites and Manassites. Thus, they were saying that these men weren't real Gileadites, but were people who ran away from Ephraim and Manasseh, likely meaning that they were cowards in that regard. Jephthah was going to have none of that, and so he decided to respond back. Why did Jephthah behave this way instead of the way Gideon acted? Well, let's consider the difference in situation. In the attack of Gideon on the Midianites, Gideon didn't call the Ephraimites into battle, but that was because the word of the Lord had directed him who to call, and Ephraim wasn't included. Later, when Gideon needed the Ephraimites to help block the Midianites' escape, he did call the men of Ephraim. They helped, and he was able to calm them down by showing how great a victory they helped him bring. In Jephthah's case, Jephthah did call the Ephraimites into battle, though we don't have that recorded in Scripture, but they refused to come. Thus, Jephthah is saying that it wasn't his fault that they didn't get called into battle. They chose not to come. In other words, Ephraim was in the wrong and was threatening Jephthah and his men for no reason. And so, when faced with this insolence, Jephthah and his men punished the men of Ephraim for it by killing many of them in battle. Now some from Ephraim escaped the battle and wanted to cross back to the west side of the Jordan River. This had been anticipated by the men of Gilead, who seized the ford of the Jordan before the men of Ephraim had arrived. Thus they did to Ephraim here on the east side of the Jordan what Ephraim had done to the Midianites on the west side of the Jordan back in chapter 7. But not everybody who wanted to cross here would be an Ephraimite. Some might be from Manasseh, Gad, or Reuben, wanting to perhaps go to the tabernacle in Shiloh. How would the men of Gilead be able to tell the difference between these people and the fugitives from Ephraim? They devised a password, Shibboleth, which means both an ear of corn or a stream. The reason this would work is because evidently those on the east side of the Jordan pronounce this word with an SH sound, while those on the west side of the Jordan, such as the tribe of Ephraim, would pronounce it with an S sound only, for it seems that they could not pronounce the SH sound. Now this might sound strange, but let's remember that different languages and different dialects, even of the same language, have a different collection of basic sounds. Thus, when we learn to speak, our mouth and our tongue are trained to make those basic certain sounds of the language we're learning. When we're older and we try to learn a new language, it might be difficult if the language we're trying to learn has a sound that our tongue has not been trained to make. That seems to be the case here in Judges 12. If someone said Sibboleth instead of Shibboleth after being asked if they were an Ephraimite, the men of Gilead determined that this person was lying and they would be killed on the spot. Today, sometimes you might hear shibboleths still being used by some as passwords to distinguish one group of people from another. Now, the word shibboleth would not be used in this case, but another set of words that are pronounced differently by certain groups of people, where one person can be distinguished from another based on their pronunciation of that word. So if you ever hear of a word being described as a shibboleth, you can know that the idea came from here in Judges 12. In total, between the war with the Ephraimites and those killed here at the fords of the Jordan, 42,000 Ephraimites fell, a great number indeed. Verse 7 says that Jephthah judged Israel for 6 years after this, which would bring our timeline down to about 1094 BC. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Judges chapter 12, verses 8 to 15, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.